The 591st edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play, stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you guys on a Sunday night and during what's been an eventful weekend if you're a Carolina fan after going through the blowout loss to Clemson, followed by the blue-white scrimmage yesterday for Carolina basketball. And if you're a Panther fan, what a fun way to spend your Sunday watching the team engineer the second largest comeback in franchise history. I know I was something that kind of made my weekend all the more better. But now we're here on a Sunday night while former Carolina football quarterback Drake May is playing in prime time as the Patriots are taking on the Bills on Sunday Night Football. But we're here to talk a little Carolina basketball. As we mentioned, yesterday was the annual blue-white game in Chapel Hill over at the Smith Center. That's used to be the staple of the late night event, but late night's kind of gone away in the NIL era. And now the program just holds a scrimmage between two squads. And they did that yesterday. And we made the trip over after watching Carolina play football to be in attendance for that. And we're here to talk about that here tonight. So just kind of give a brief summary, a brief recap of the game really quickly. So Team White beat Team Blue 55-50. It was a 24-minute scrimmage. There were two 12-minute halves, with a 7-minute halftime that kind of broke up the scrimmage and into the two periods. Team White led 30-25 at the break, and then they'd go on to win, as I mentioned, 55-50. And Team White was the team that, from a talent perspective and the way these rosters were compromised, should have won the game. They had Kyan Evans, they had Caleb Wilson, they had Henry Visar on their side, and they definitely did look the part. But Team Blue was very competitive, as the score would suggest, and they even took a lead in the second half. And there was a time where I thought that maybe with what Seth Trimble and Luca Bogavots were doing for them on that end of the floor, maybe they would, quote-unquote, upset Team White, but Team White would emerge away victorious. Unfortunately, there were three players that did not play in the scrimmage. We did not get to see the two freshmen outside of Caleb Wilson, Derek Dixon, and Isaiah Dennis both did not play, along with High Point transfer Ivan Matlakovich. He was not in uniform for Carolina yesterday afternoon either. Before we get into full thoughts, full takeaways, a full recap, if you will, of the scrimmage, just your initial thoughts yesterday, being back in the Smith Center and getting your first look at this 2025-2026 revamped Carolina basketball roster.
Yeah, I think you have to feel pretty good about what you saw yesterday in the Smith Center. I think, part of it is that, what you saw in Kenan Stadium was so bad that it was hard not to feel good coming away from a scrimmage where it's just your guys. But you really felt like there were some things that we saw that we didn't see with last year's group. I think you saw that Vasar definitely brings the size that you need down low. Caleb Wilson also helps with that. So those size concerns that you had from a year ago should be, I'm not going to say completely gone, but definitely should be helped by what you saw in this scrimmage. Now, when you get to, the backup big man spot, that certainly is a question that I think is going to extend into the season. Who really steps up there? Is it Zayden High? Is it James Brown that ends up stepping up? The other thing that we talked about with this team, they needed size, they needed shooting. I think you went out and got both, covered both of your bases there, and we got to see that in this scrimmage. This team, I didn't think they shot the ball perfect. I did think that there were some areas where, you were hoping that shots would go down that didn't necessarily go down, but it was the looks that they were getting. It was the quality of looks that they were getting that had to make you feel pretty good. So I think leaving the scrimmage overall, I feel like, this is a team that is going to be able to compete at a high level. I think they are going to be able to compete in the ACC. And that was really what I was hoping to leave feeling. I don't know if this is a team that's going to, push for, the second weekend of the tournament. I don't know if it's a team that's going to push to make a Final Four. I'm not ready to go that far just yet. I just, to me, I think you just wanted to see some incremental steps in the right direction for Carolina here early. Get a feeling that, this is a team that's built the correct way. And I think you got that, especially with the pace that we saw from these guys, which I think was probably the most shocking thing for us, because we've heard that Carolina wants to play faster. We've been hearing that for years under Hubert Davis. Well, this team looks like they are actually legitimately going to play faster, because they look like they got a point guard that's going to push the limits on that end when it comes to getting this team out in transition and everything like that. And I couldn't be more happy to see that.
Yeah, I think just, initially just felt good to be back home, felt good to be back in that building. It felt good to be watching basketball, taking in basketball, and trying to get a feel and a vibe for this team, and what's going to be labeled from the fan base's perspective, a make or break season for Hubert Davis. And look, he'll be in Charlotte on Tuesday. That's when Carolina will be in town for ACC tip-off. I'm credentialed. My plan is to be out there, and I'm hoping whether it's myself or someone else in attendance there, we can maybe, because since Hubert has admitted to feeling some sort of pressure, just kind of get a sense of where he thinks he is and what he has to do to solidify himself. I kind of talked about that when we did our 5 questions, what I think he has to do to achieve, to be retained as Carolina's head coach moving forward. But you got a good feel, I thought, the other day in 24 minutes of action of what this team can be, and the potential of this group. And, and I think as we're going to learn over the next 25, 30 minutes or so, I liked what I saw. And I was very encouraged by what I saw. And I'm really excited to tell you guys all about what I saw. But before we do that, before we get into our full-blown, takeaway portion of tonight's episode, we got to tell you about our new sponsor. That's Legacy Arcade. We introduced them to you guys on the last edition of the podcast, and they're going to be with us here for the foreseeable future. Legacy Arcade and Social Casino is where you can win cash prizes with roulette, blackjack, or your favorite slot games and multiplayer fish games. You can also win cash prizes playing your favorite arcade games as well. There's a variety of different games there for you to partake. You see that promo code, or you see that QR code on the screen there, if you take a picture of that, if you scan that, and you use our promo code HEELS, you get up to $100 free in match play when you register your account through Legacy Arcade. Another plus about playing with them and using them as your gaming source, they are safe, secure with 24-hour customer support, instant redemption immediately to your bank account or your card of choice. They accept all major credit cards, Skrill and ACH. And if you're an iPhone user and you live and die by Apple Pay, good news is that Apple Pay is coming soon. So make sure you get to Legacy Arcade, get to that website, use that promo code HEAL, and take advantage of $100 free in free play upon registration. Let's go ahead, Anthony, and get right into the takeaways from last night's or yesterday afternoon's blue-white scrimmage. I got a handful of that I wrote down, and I'll do the kind favor of letting you kind of interject as well if you have something different that maybe you took away, because we do see the game differently. We're going to start with the international transfer, Luca Bogavots, who, I think him and Caleb Wilson, the impact that they have on the court, I think will impact what Carolina's record looks like in the win-loss column. Luca was the guy that Carolina identified they had to go add early in the summer after they initially rebuilt the roster, because there was a glaring need on the wing at that perimeter spot, at that 3 spot. And they went and got him in. They bring him in internationally. He's from Montenegro. And at 21 years old, I think it was fair to expect there to be a maturity level displayed that exceeds what you see from the incoming freshmen, or even some of the transfers that are 21 years of age, simply because where he's played overseas, he's done so at the international level. And every person that's been able to see him play and evaluate him, everyone has said you could tell that he doesn't get sped up. He plays at his own pace. And that was, I thought, the biggest sense and the biggest feeling I got from him watching him play as well. He played fast, but he never hurried. And there was a great sense, I thought, when he felt like he should take that 3-point shot, whether it was catch and shoot, whether it was in transition, coming off the dribble, a screen, no matter what it was. And then when he felt like he should put the ball on the floor and try to attack the basket. Now, he only took one shot inside the 3-point line, which Adam Lucas noted in his rapid reaction article for Go Heels. That's not going to be the norm. He does play a lot in the mid-range. We talked about when he was a 3-level scorer. You saw more of him wanting to shoot the ball from behind the arc last night, but I always felt like every shot that he took was in rhythm for him and within rhythm of the offense. It didn't feel like anything was forced. It kind of felt like what you saw, what you got from Cormac Ryan, just with a higher level of talent. Like, there's just more natural ability with Luca than there was with Cormac. But when Cormac played at a high level for Carolina, it was always within rhythm of himself, within the rhythm of the offense. And so I came away looking at what he did offensively, and that was where my biggest focus was going to be on. He looks the part, and I think is prepared to be this team's either top leading scorer or their second leading scorer this upcoming season.
Yeah, he made Bartorvik look just pathetic in what his expectations were for the season. I mean, that was a tremendous performance out of him. I mean, he was great. He needed to step up and show that he was going to be the guy that this team was really missing, because he was a late addition to the squad. Well, he's looking like a really good late addition. He's looking like the guy that Carolina wanted to go out and get. You're right. I thought every shot that he took was really in the flow of the offense. I thought he did a really good job of creating space for himself throughout the night, and did a tremendous job of knocking down shots, or at least getting good looks from beyond the arc. Some of those shots didn't necessarily go down. But again, this is what Carolina is looking for. They are looking for a guy that can get through those 3-point shots up, at a pretty decent rate. Now, you said you're going to see more of him in the mid-range. I think we saw some moments of him being able to create off the dribble. Now, it wasn't create in terms of finding his own shot, but it was to create by getting to the basket and then looking to pass to somebody. I thought early there was a turnover that was a little bit concerning and everything like that. But once he settled into the game, he really looked the part of a veteran guy that was just taking shots that he needed to take. And that's something that you just didn't see from Carolina last year. Everything was incredibly difficult. It seemed like everything had to be forced at times. And guys, were not taking shots that they needed to throughout the year. You had too many guys on the floor that I'm not going to say they were afraid, but they weren't confident enough in themselves to be able to throw up some of those shots. You saw a guy that was confident in himself, that knew exactly what he brought to the table. And I think that's something that you can't undervalue if you're a Tar Heel fan going into the season, that you have someone like that on your roster. I'm expecting that, you're probably going to see a little more of that mid-range game, that ability to create separation off the dribble. I think we'll see that probably as we go throughout some of the other scrimmages. We won't be in attendance for it, but maybe you see that a little bit more in the Asheville scrimmage, or maybe you see it when they play BYU. But I think he showed, from what we saw last night, he is definitely going to be a starter on this team. He's definitely going to average more than 6 points a game this season, and he's going to be a guy that is going to be a problem for Carolina if he can find his shot from the outside and knock down, even 37, 38%, like you were saying yesterday when we were there in attendance in the Smith Center. If he can get to that number, you'd feel really good about where things are at.
Yeah, let me come to the defense of my man Bart Torvik, by the way. I think, that's just it was a projection of unknown, because there is still uncertainty around him, because there is still waiting NCAA clearance. And his model, his projection, maybe favors someone more like Jonathan Powell. So, I saw the 6.6 or whatever it was, and I definitely raised my eyebrow. But that's a guy that his analytics are provided to the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee. So I will value him, and it's why I'm going to try to bring him on my podcast, albeit you calling his projection model quote unquote pathetic. Hopefully he did not hear that, but you saw what he's capable of being, and I think why Carolina valued him the way that they did, going and bringing him in. Maybe some of the other international players that they did check in on, early on in the summer. I'm excited to have Luca here. I think he's the best Luca playing basketball in the United States, and I think he's going to do some big time things for Carolina, which will be 2 years. We're still waiting on him to be deemed eligible, but we do know that he is going to be listed as a junior on the roster. That was made known on Friday. It was updated on the website at goheels.com. So very good chance I think he'll be one and done, because he was thinking about going to the NBA last year. But if he were to play in college, he'll have 2 years at his disposal. Let's get to another guy that will more than likely be one and done, and that's probably going to be a good thing if he is, and that's the incoming top 10 recruit, 5-star freshman Caleb Wilson, who looked every bit the part yesterday afternoon for Carolina. It takes a lot to get me excited about a freshman. It takes a lot to make me drool watching a freshman play basketball. I did not have anything to eat when I was at the Smith Center yesterday. I simply just had a Sprite to drink, and I was foaming at the mouth. I was salivating over everything that I saw and everything that he can and will be for Carolina this upcoming year. And it's not even just his God-given ability and what he's blessed with. The most impressive thing about him, and what I think is going to make him so unique, is no one played harder than he did yesterday.
Yep.
And I thought there was a competitive energy and a competitive spirit from both sides. But I thought Caleb Wilson was the tone setter, man. Like, that was the guy that was, going in there in between three guys to try to get a rebound. He was the guy, chasing, doing hard closeouts, running back defensively, doing all the little things that you need your role players to do, but he's doing it as the most gifted player on the roster. And then you just get into what makes him a top 10 recruit. his ability to have a back to the basket game, something that he's working on tirelessly with Sean May. His ability to play with his face up and create separation without putting the ball on the floor. Little Carmelo Anthony with the jab step and the ability to get 6 to 8 feet in between him and his defender, rise up and shoot it. His ability to play in transition and get downhill. He's going to get to the foul line 4-6 times because the amount of pressure he's going to put on the rim. And then there's the ability to get a rebound and then just jump over everybody and dunk it. And he did that yesterday, and it brought everybody and their mother to their feet. And so, trying to temper expectations, because we've seen top 10 recruits, 5-star freshmen come in and have an adjustment period to playing collegiate basketball the way that Carolina wants their players to play. But my God, man, from everything that we have seen, everything that we've read, everything we've been told about this kid, he passed the bar with flying colors, and my excitement level for him is as high as it's been for an incoming freshman in quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, between him and Luca, that was what produced most of the moaning that came from the section from us, because there were multiple times where guys were making plays and it was just, oh God, yes. It's because we haven't seen this. We just haven't seen this from Carolina, it feels like, in a while. So it was understandable. This was something I witnessed when I saw him in the All-American game, was that he was just a relentless player. Even though he wasn't a guy that was the focal point of the offense, he was going to be a guy that was going to give you tireless effort no matter what. He was going to rebound well. He was going to be a guy that would defend at a really high level. There were times yesterday, he's going through guys to make plays. Even if they do have position on him, he's doing a great job of creating those turnovers. That's what you want to see from a guy of his nature. It's just the continued hustle. That's something that, some of these other 5-stars that we've seen come in here, they don't necessarily seem to have that same level of concentration and that same level of willingness and want to. It seems like they feel like things are going to come easy to them at times because they are 5-stars. And that was not the thing that you felt watching Caleb Wilson yesterday. You felt like this was a guy that was working his tail off for everything. And that's certainly something that you like to see. His back to the basket game, that was one of the reasons I didn't want him at the 3. Because I thought that if he was at the 3, when people were saying, yeah, we're going to go with the bigger lineup, if he's at the 3, that really takes away that ability to do that. You're not going to have too many guys that are playing that 3 role that are going to be playing back to the basket because it's just going to crowd the paint and everything is going to be a little bit more difficult. Him at the 4, I think, is perfect because he's going to create mismatches. There are going to be a lot of guys with his face-up game that are not going to be able to defend him. So I think he is the perfect fit for that 4 spot. I think he showed you that yesterday, and he looked a part of a 5-star freshman, man. And again, it is the first scrimmage that we have seen from him outside of the ones that you saw in the summer. But every time that we see this kid, he is making some sort of highlight reel play. Whether it's in the clips that we're seeing from practice, whether it's in the scrimmages that we saw in the summer, or whether it's what we're seeing now, he's always a guy that stands out. I'm going to be real interested to see what does he look like in the BYU scrimmage, because going up against A.J. DeBansa, that's the guy that everybody's talking about. That's the guy that they're going to be talking about coming into that game amongst the 5-stars. They're comparing him to Cooper Flagg. Could he be a better prospect than Cooper Flagg is? If Caleb Wilson comes out and can do what he did in this scrimmage, he will be talked about just as much on that broadcast as A.J. DeBansa. And I think that's a great measuring stick for him going up against one of the best in his own class.
Well, just knowing how competitive he is, and the fact that Carolina lost out on DeBansa to BYU, I think, he'll take it, I don't want to say personal, but he'll understand what message he can send. And the opportunity that it sends. And look, that's a real good thing, I think, for college basketball, that those two programs decided to do a preseason exhibition that's going to go to a great cause. But also put these two high-flying players on display at a time in the calendar where we are focused still primarily on college football, the NFL, and everything else going on in the sports world. There was a sequence that was, and I think it may have been like Carolina's like first legitimate possession after winning the tip, where he literally got the ball. They isolated him on one side of the floor. He took the ball from the top of the key to what would be the right block, back the defender down, turn around and scored.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked right at you and I said, that's the bleep they did with Harrison Ingram. That's what you could do when you had Harrison Ingram on the floor, is that you could isolate him on one end and then have everyone else play off of him because the offense ran so smoothly through him. And that's what helped produce the season that RJ Davis had. It made the game easier for Armando Bacot. When Cormac's shot was falling, that was a big reason why, was because Harrison Ingram just demanded so much attention that the defense would collapse. And I think that's going to be the same thing that's going to happen with Caleb Wilson, man, is that he's going to demand so much attention. And I don't want to take away from HI because I loved Harrison Ingram, but Caleb Wilson's a better basketball player than he was. But he plays with the same level of effort and intensity and focus, which is why he's going to be, I think, a first-team All-ACC candidate and could borderline flirt with being an All-American. This is going to help Seth Trimble as he learns to become a lead guard. This will help Kyan Evans transition from Colorado State to UNC, from playing at the Mountain West level to playing at the ACC level. This will help Luca Bogavots as he does make the adjustment from international basketball to basketball in the ACC. And so I think that's what's so easy to get excited about him for, as well as he is individually and what he'll bring to the table as an individual. He, as much as anybody else on this roster, makes the other guys around him better. And that's the biggest thing. That's going to be what's going to separate him apart. And that could be what really elevates Carolina from maybe being a team that finishes maybe 4th or 5th in the ACC to maybe competing for a top 3 spot and maybe, just maybe, an ACC regular season title.
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy that really is, the glue guy on the team, that everybody is going to be better when he is out on the floor. And I think the thing is, you're also going to see a guy that's probably not going to be afraid to speak up, probably not going to be afraid to be a leader as a freshman, because he is someone that is very vocal out on the floor, good communicator. And I think that's something that, especially if he plays the way that we've seen him play so far in some of these practices and then into some of these scrimmages, then yeah, you feel pretty good about him being a guy that's going to be able to back up, what he's saying to other guys on the floor if he does want to become a leader, because he's going to be able to score the ball at a high level, but he can do so many different things. He's the connector that this team needs. And so I think, he is destined for a big role this season. I think he fits that 4 spot so perfectly because of everything that he can do. His game is just so complete. It feels like at this point that I think he's going to be an incredibly difficult guard for any 4 in this conference. So he definitely, to me, I think the one thing that many people wanted to also figure out is how tall is he? He's a guy that, we heard at one time was 6'10". He said in his intro video, he's 6'7". Again, that's, with shoes, without shoes.
6'7".
It's the stupid thing when it comes to measurements, how they do it with basketball without shoes. Why do they even measure guys without shoes? That doesn't make any sense. So I think, he had just enough size to be able to play that 4 spot, play it successfully. And I've told you, he can guard anywhere from the 4 to the 2. He's got that ability. So when you got a guy like that can just do all these different things on the floor, he's going to make everyone better around him. So I expect a huge year from him. And what I saw yesterday, I think just backs up and validates my point that this is a special 5-star that is coming in here, and he is going to buck that trend that Carolina has had recently with 5-star prospects that haven't panned out.
Did want to work in a comment here from our guy, Greg Ward. He said on the Facebook stream, Caleb is the real deal, and he plays hard on every single play. Greg, could not agree with you more. Also, Greg tracked us down, met us, introduced himself to us at the Smith Center. Longtime supporter to both the Heel Tough Blog podcast, the Four Corners podcast. We've been trying to meet up for a couple years now, and it was great to finally, shake hands, be able to thank you for all the support you've shown us individually and collectively as a podcast and as a website. So, Greg, really glad we got to meet you. Appreciate you coming by. And we want to encourage you. If you see us out in public, we're season ticket holders at football games. We get to a handful of basketball games. Don't be afraid to come by and say, hey, we're not the best looking guys in the world, but we're not going to bite you. And we do like meeting the people that support us and really allow us to do this thing and give us the platform to have the website that we have and have the podcast that we have. So we've been able to meet a couple different people out of football games. That's been a lot of fun. We want to encourage y'all to do that throughout the remainder of the football season and on into the basketball season. Let's get to a few more takeaways before we do get out of this edition of the podcast here on a Sunday night. A lot of focus, a lot of attention was going to be on the revamped front court because Carolina had to rebuild it after not having a legitimate front court a year ago. You lose Van Allen-Lubin to Will Wade and NC State, and what all that's going to entail when those two teams tangle up in February. But I think Carolina got a better big man than Van Allen-Lubin and Henry Vassar, the Arizona big man who was just all over the place yesterday. I mean, he was, shooting threes. He was back to the basket, face up, was going for rebounds, big-time screener, physical as all get out. But it's not just him. You got to see Jaron Stevenson the first time. You see the re-addition of Zayden High, and Zayden High made a three-point shot, and it looked very fluid coming out of his hand, a lot more fluid than it did his first season. I thought James Brown made a couple plays in the pick and roll that was really easy to get excited about. If you want to add Luca as a front court player, you saw Jonathan Powell, what he's going to do. He's going to shoot a lot of threes. He's going to make a lot of threes. I'd still, depending on what Kyan Evans does, I'm still not ready to declare that the front court is the strength of this roster. That was an opinion of John Rothstein that he delivered back earlier this offseason. I don't know if I'm willing to go there, but I can tell you that this is the front court that Hubert Davis has envisioned having his 5 years as Carolina's head coach. And he's quite literally never had a front court that is this versatile, offensively, defensively, interchangeable. You're going to see Carolina play big. You're going to see them utilize all these different guys in a lot of different ways. And now it's his job to cultivate the best lineup and the best rotation when you've got, I think, as much legitimate depth as this front court has. But I think that was where all the attention was going to be. And you could see the makings of a front court that is primed and ready to be night and day better than what Carolina was dealt last year when the front court was the thing that held them back from reaching their potential as a preseason top 10 team.
Yeah, it's so far ahead of where last year's front court was. I think, when you look at Vassar, he looks like a legitimate threat out of that 5 spot, especially as a scoring threat. One of the first possessions that they had on the offensive end of the floor right in front of us, I mean, he ends up just taking it right to the basket. The back down game was tremendous against James Brown. Now, again, there are going to be better big men that he's going to be competing with once he gets into ACC play. But I definitely thought that you saw that area of his game. You saw that there is a mid-range area to his game as well. And then, you even saw he was able to stretch the floor, something that Carolina really wasn't able to do last year. We said, hey, the 5 spot, we thought Jalen Washington was going to be a guy that was going to be able to consistently stretch the floor for the team. That didn't happen at all. This year's team looks to be much different in terms of the front court. I think, in terms of rebounding, but also in terms of shooting. I think you've got a group that has the ability to actually legitimately stretch the floor. I mean, Jaron Stevenson, definitely a guy that has that ability. We know that was basically all he was when he was at Alabama. Carolina, trying to change that a little bit. You saw a little bit of that yesterday where he was able to play a little bit closer to the basket and succeed. He was the guy that was more involved as a screener and looked pretty decent. But, I think Vasar was the guy that you came away most impressed with. I mean, his ability to set screens and roll to the basket was just tremendous. I mean, Carolina is going to be able to do that to teams a lot this year, it feels like, with him out there on the floor. I think one thing that he's going to be able to do that he wasn't necessarily able to do in this at a consistent rate, because I didn't think the officiating was nearly as great as it probably will be when you get into regular season play. There were some fouls that I think he would have drawn in a regular season game that you didn't see called in this scrimmage. So I definitely think that, what you saw from him, you have to feel positive. I do think that, there were a couple of shots that went awry that you would like to see him, be able to knock down. But I think for the most part, you had to leave feeling pretty encouraged with him. And then, at the backup big spot, I still think there are some question marks when it comes to those guys. There's no doubt about that. I do think defensively, that's really the area that you do worry about, both James Brown and Zayden High being guys that could be taken advantage of. But I think you saw some good things offensively, especially Zayden High. I thought he was probably the better of the two guys out there, and his ability to stretch the floor. That was something that last year we saw was a part of his game. He was a guy that was probably going to play the 4 spot last year. And so they had him shooting a lot of threes from the outside. We saw that in some of the scrimmages that we saw in the preseason. But then, with everything that ends up happening, now Carolina really needs him at the 5 when he comes back. And so he's got to change his game around a little bit. So, I thought the one thing that you noticed from him that was better than what we saw from him in his first season in Chapel Hill was that he was able to defend without fouling. So that's something that's encouraging. You're hoping that that continues moving forward. And the thing is, too, I didn't think either guy was great to the point where you can't even, where you say there's absolutely no chance that Ivan Matalakovic ends up, playing at some point this season. I would be personally a little shocked if we see him that much this season, because he was a guy that didn't really play a lot at High Point, but I think Carolina likes the build, likes, the overall size that he brings to the table. So you never really know. And I think really what you can take away when you combine that with what we talked about with Caleb Wilson, and especially if you're putting in Luca as part of that front court group, you can leave feeling pretty confident that your front court is going to be pretty solid this year.
Yeah, it's versatile. You're going to see a lot of different guys. You think about, Jaron Stevenson, he could play the 3, the 4, or the 5 because of his height. And that's going to happen. I think you need to find, an answer at that backup 5 spot. I'd love for it to be James Brown. That's the guy I'm the highest on. And you could tell, look, the weight he's added, I think he's ready to play more minutes, but is it going to be minutes with production, or are you just stealing minutes while he's, on the floor with Henry Vassar? I do think a big thing we'll talk about as the season moves along, once you get into conference play, it'll be very imperative that Vassar stays out of foul trouble. Because I think there's going to be some data that'll prove how valuable he is and what Carolina's plus minus and what their offensive and defensive efficiencies are with and without him. That'll make us feel like we need to have him on the court, 28 to 32 minutes a night once we get into conference play. Let's get to the last takeaway that might be the thing that had me drooling, or according to you, moaning the most while in attendance. I don't recall moaning, but it very well could have happened. Simply because for about an hour I forgot about what happened while at Kenan Stadium, and it felt good to be a Carolina fan again. This offense has a different look and it has a different feel. The feel is This team is not going to talk about running and not do it. This team is going to run, and they're going to run, and they're going to run, and they're going to run. You've been watching games with me for 15 years. There are two things I can say on this podcast that I say every time I watch this team play basketball. The first thing I tell them to do is to run. And then the second thing I tell them to do is to rebound.
Yep.
And by the way, I think they're going to rebound a lot better this year because I thought they were relentless going after the ball. And that's something that's really, really going to make me moan once we get into the actual season. The running is the big thing. Hubert Davis talked last year about wanting to be the fastest team in the country from foul line to foul line, which was a great talking point, and it got me excited. And I bought in. He didn't have a roster built to run. That was a roster built to play within the half court. Carolina wasn't clinical enough in the half court to be an efficient offense. This roster with all the different athletes, with all the athleticism, starting with Evans and Trimble, and then even Luca, who I think is sneaky athletic, mainly Caleb Wilson, what Bassar can do. This is a lineup that needs to play in the open floor and generate those 8 to 12 easy points that you couldn't generate last year that could really be the difference in playing or winning the game. And it starts and ends with Kai and Evans. I tweeted this out, and his mom saw the tweet and retweeted. If you don't follow me, do so. I'll make you a smarter fan, HTB_Josh. But that was the first thing I noticed with him, was that when he gets the ball, he's looking to go. Mm-hmm. It's not quite Kendall Marshall-esque because he likes to use the dribble a little bit more, where Marshall was an outlet passer. He got it and would pass the ball at the court. But it takes him 3 dribbles, and Carolina's across the timeline. And Carolina's already into their action with 24 seconds left to go on the shot clock. And I cannot stress to you enough the difference that makes, as opposed to last year when Carolina was getting across the court with 21, 22 seconds and really not getting into their stuff until 12 to 15 seconds. I thought everything was just quicker. Everything was more fluid. I thought it was nonstop action and movement. And that's the way the game is supposed to be played. Whereas last year, it just felt like there was a lot of, we're going to dribble a hole in the freaking floor because no one's going to move. I don't think that's going to be the issue with Kai and Evans. I think the one thing I maybe came away with him yesterday is I want him to be more aggressive shooting. But if he's going to get the ball up the court the way he got the ball up the court yesterday, he already has a fan in me because I grew up watching this team play fast. I believe in playing fast. And I think this roster is equipped to play as fast as they've played in quite some time.
Yeah, this is a more athletic roster than we have seen in a while. And you got to think that, for him, he was playing with the 2 bigs. He was playing with Henry Vasar and Caleb Wilson and was able to get up and down the court at the rate that he was able to. That shows you that those guys are ready to run. They are going to be guys that get out in space. And that's really where they're going to succeed, especially Caleb Wilson, man. He's so athletic. That's something that he loves to do, is create those buckets in transition, especially if he's able to take it to the basket and finish with authority. That's certainly something that he's going to be looking to do. And so I want to see Carolina picking up that pace. I thought Luca was a guy that was able to succeed in that area as well when Carolina would pick up the pace. And we know that Seth Trimble, with his ability to get to the rim, he's going to be successful with the pace being picked up as well. A lot of these guys feel like guys that can play in this higher pace. I mean, even Jonathan Powell, I think, really fits that pace as well, because he's going to be a guy that can be the trailer on some of those pushes up the court and ends up being a guy that knocks down a 3. We didn't see that at all last year. You're right. Last year, it was basically, can we find a way to possibly smash the ball into the floor anymore on this one end of the floor? Because, there was so much dribbling. And the thing is there was so much isolation game for Carolina. It was very NBA-esque, where Carolina had to have guys that simply could create space on their own because the screens that were being set were not very effective. At times you would it just demanded it, that you were somebody where you get the ball in your hands with about 6-7 seconds to go on the shot clock. Okay, well, it's time for you to go to work and create. And so, I mean, at that point, that was not something that led to a lot of success for Carolina, because here's the thing. If you're going to have guys that do that, you better have guys that can really shoot the basketball. And Carolina last year did not have that. I think this year they're going to be a much better shooting team, but this team isn't going to need to play in the half court because you've got a point guard that's willing to push the ball up the court as much as possible. And that's the thing that I think, I'll take away from him the most. Yes, I did want to see him be a little bit more aggressive, seeking out his own scoring game. But I think for the most part, you wanted to see a guy that could just control this offense and be able to move them up and down the court at a pretty good pace. He did that. And so I left feeling encouraged about what Kyan Evans can be, even though it was a little bit different than what we saw from him in his time at Colorado State.
The other thing I took away, and this is very NBA-esque, but I like this addition to Carolina's half-court offense. And this was the biggest thing I implored Hubert Davis to add with the addition of Henry Visar after seeing some of the great film that David Sisk put out over there from Tar Heel 24/7. Carolina is going to run a lot, and I mean a lot of pick and roll. And that's a good thing because of the athletes that you have. You need to get the most out of their athleticism, but also when you look at Visar, I mean, first off, excellent quality screener.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's so good at setting screens. Carolina's actually changed the way they're setting screens, where there's more of an arm out, and it's going to get more separation for that defender trying to fight through that ball screen. You know, we complained so much last year, some people complained so much last year about the shots Carolina were taking. Every shot that Carolina took in the half court was contested. Yeah. They couldn't screen guys open. Well, they're going to screen dudes open because you've got wide-bodied dudes that set good, hard physical screens. But Visar can, he can screen and roll. He can screen and pop. I think he's a great, screener, and then maybe with another rescreen. I think you'll see a lot of screen the screener action with him as well. And then what about when you put Caleb Wilson in the pick and roll, and that mammoth of a man is rolling to the rim? You've now got a lob threat, or just a guy that if he gets it coming downhill, they want to kind of short roll him at the foul line like Kansas did with KJ Adams. How are you stopping that? He's either going to score, he's going to dunk, or he's going to get fouled, or he's going to do all of that of the above, where he'll be a lot of and one opportunities. And then I think what it'll do, just forcing the defense to collapse, the ball movement, the reversal, and finding open threes. There were so many times where Carolina pick and rolled, they put the ball in the corner, and they swung it to the wing, and there was an open three. And they made some of them. They didn't make enough of them, but those were just looks last year they could not get. Mm-hmm. And if there's one thing that I've been critical of, that basketball people have been critical of, is just how lazy Carolina could be in the half court. They're not going to be lazy, man. I think the ball is going to be popping. I think the ball is going to move, and they are going to set screen after screen after screen and wear down their opponents. And I think you really got to applaud this coaching staff for making that adjustment already this early into the preseason, where they're maximizing the abilities of their guys on the offensive end of the floor. And I think it might be what makes this the most efficient and explosive offense Hubert Davis has coached in his brief tenure at Carolina.
Yeah, I think you're certainly seeing, you talked about it. One of the things that I really liked was, you saw multiple times the screen rescreen action. You had to see it because the screen and roll on the initial screen that was set wasn't overly effective. Okay, well then let's get back and find another screen here that can hopefully free one of our guys up. And we saw that multiple times. That's something that you really like to see. And yeah, you talked about it. You've got guys that can pick and roll, that can pick and pop. It seems like everybody has that capability. And when you have the ability to do that, that's something that really is going to make you really dynamic on the offensive end of the floor. It felt like last year when you would set initial screens, if they weren't effective, that was pretty much it. Okay, from there, we're just leaving this guy isolated one-on-one, and you've got to create separation on your own. That's not going to lead to a lot of success at any level because it's going to be a lot of contested shots. But again, you're going to need those elite shooters. And I don't think that you had that a year ago for Carolina. So, this offense certainly looks a lot more, a lot more complex. It certainly looks like it is a group that is playing, more together than the group that we saw last year, which felt like it was a more, isolation basketball, which was really just, guys basically trying to show how good of players they were on the offensive end of the floor at times. So credit to this staff. It seems like they got together a really good group that is bought in on playing selfless basketball, that wants to push the pace as much as anybody in the country, and that is doing the things that you need to be able to do, rebounding, sharing the basketball at the rate that we need them to. So, again, I just go back to my initial takeaways is I feel good about this team. I don't know how good I feel about them. I'm not ready to say that this is a team that's going to be playing in the Final Four, playing on the final Monday night. I'm not yet at that level, but I do think that this is going to be a very competitive team, and you feel much better about this team on the offensive end of the floor and encouraged about what this team can be defensively.
Yeah, look, I would love to sit here and beat my chest and wave my pom-pom and say this is a Final Four roster. I'm not saying that. Is this a second weekend type of team? Absolutely. And that's important because if this roster gets to the second weekend, you learn a lot about your head coach. And also you get to the second weekend, it's kind of like the MLB postseason. From the second weekend on, man, it's just a crapshoot. It's really about surviving the first weekend and getting yourself in a good position for the second weekend to have the type of March that you want to have that can maybe turn into an April an April to remember. And this roster is capable of doing that. And that's a good place to be because if we were being honest, before they added Luca, I don't know if I was there. But I see Luca in person. I see Caleb Wilson in person. I saw Seth Trimble look improved as an offensive scoring threat. I know what's in Kyan Evans's bag. And I could see it cultivating in something that could be very, very fun to watch, very entertaining to watch, but also doing what this team needs to do, which is win at the high level that they need to win at. One last comment from our guy, Greg, and then we'll get to the one closing note I have. He said, don't y'all think Stevenson needs to attack the rim more and insert himself rebounding? Absolutely. And I do think, when he's playing with a roster that's better suited as opposed to what he was having to deal with yesterday, I think that's going to be the communication from Hubert Davis. Hey, set a lot of screens, get downhill because you're just a thick-bodied individual that's a lot to handle. Get to the foul line, get to the defensive board, get to the offensive board. Okay. Can you shoot 35% from three? I think he can. And so, yes, I think, if that roster was better put together, you didn't have Derek Dixon, you didn't have Isaiah Dennis. I was hoping to see DD and ID on the floor yesterday, and that's what I'm calling those guys because if not, we'll be calling them, Derek Dennis and Isaiah Dixon. So we're just going to go with the initials. Who doesn't love double Ds? You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, you like that. You didn't have those two guys on the floor. But yes, Greg, great point by you as always. And I think you'll see that from him because I do think that's going to be one that Hubert Davis tells him, hey, this is what you're here to do. Now you go do it because that's what now theoretically and technically I'm paying you to do. The best thing I think you have to like about this group and Trimble made it known in the post, they competed and they played hard and it looked like and it felt like Carolina basketball. And I can't stress to you how important that feels because last year just did not. And it didn't feel like Carolina basketball. And quite frankly, when it's gone bad under Hubert, it hasn't felt like Carolina basketball. And you might say, well, that's just how it always is. No, there were times when Carolina lost under Roy Williams. It still felt like Carolina. It still looked like Carolina. They just got beat. It's felt like under Hubert when they've gotten beaten and they've looked the way they looked. It hasn't been Carolina-esque. This is going to be Carolina-esque, which makes it easier to root for, support, defend, wrap your arms around and love for hopefully 40 nights this upcoming basketball season. One closing note for you guys before we do get out of this edition of the pod. Should have noted this to you guys on Friday, but I forgot. Just a future scheduling note, but a pretty important one, a unique one. Carolina has scheduled a home-and-home with Butler, the former program that went to back-to-back national title games are now in the Big East, trying to, resurge under Thad Matta, but that'll begin next year. Carolina will host the Bulldogs in Chapel Hill and then make the return trip the following year to Hinkle Fieldhouse. That could be important because if you're a basketball junkie like me, that's a top 10 venue in the sport. Maybe you want to start planning to make the road trip to see the Heels take on Butler a few years from now. With that, folks, it is going to wrap up this edition of the Four Corners podcast. In the meantime, guys, we will direct you guys to the website, HeelToughBlog.com, where the recap article got posted late last night, later than we expected. We had some technical difficulties on our way back from Chapel Hill that hindered the article going up as quickly as we wanted to. But the article is up there for you guys. Goes a little bit more in depth on some of these topics we talked about tonight if you want to go and read that. As I mentioned, ACC tip-off is this week. I'll have you covered with all the things coming out of Charlotte as we'll get, the preseason voting, preseason teams, and all that nature. So be on the lookout for that coverage as our preseason content is now officially going to start being posted on the website on a weekly manner. Anthony has you covered all things Carolina football. Heels get embarrassed by Clemson. The recap article from that game is up if you want to go and read that. We'll be live tomorrow night on the Heel Tough Blog podcast, recapping that loss to Clemson. So be on the lookout for that edition of the podcast on the football side of things. But we just encourage you guys to go to the website every single day, HeelToughBlog.com, the latest and best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform, just search the Four Corners podcast and we will pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe if you are an audio consumer of the pod. If you take in the pod visually, the best way to stay up to date with us, like and follow us on Facebook and on the YouTube at Heel Tough Blog. If you like and follow us on those pages, you will get notified when we go live. If you consume us on Twitter, or follow me on Twitter, HTB_Josh. When we hit the live button, you'll get a notification. That way you'll be there from start to finish throughout the remainder of the basketball preseason and on into the regular season. One last reminder, use that promo code HEELS at Legacy Arcade. You get $100 in your first upon registration. So make sure you take advantage of that great offer while we have that running as well. But with that, folks, it is going to wrap up this edition of the podcast. I do thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.